Welcome everybody to day two of 12 Days of Autumn. Really appreciate you for joining. We have a great presentation today, something I think that everybody can take something away from and use to progress themselves in their career. And we can't wait to get started. So first, I want to introduce myself. My name is Issa, and I am representing the Austin Urban Technology Movement today. And we also have Denise.
Hey everyone, I'm Denise Gadsden. I work for Optum, which is part of UHG. UHG just stands for United Health Group. And I'm also representing the Shades Group, which is the Austin chapter of our diversity and inclusion group. So we've kind of partnered with Autumn in a couple events in the past, and we continue to do so. They're a great group to partner with. And we have Mai and Josh on as well, who are going to be presenting tonight. So you've got lots of resources on here from both Autumn and Optum, who will, are willing to look at your resumes, give you some pointers, any questions that you have. I know later on in the agenda, we'll kind of go over some job opportunities that might be open for y'all to take advantage of. So again, if there are any questions or anything like that, just feel free to connect with one of us.
Definitely. Thank you, Denise. And in addition to that, some of the other takeaways, if you have any questions or you're looking forward to joining Autumn as what we call an Autumnite, that is a person who is wanting to take advantage of our cohorts in specific areas of tech, or maybe gain some more professional or career development training, definitely make sure you check out one of our last slides. We have all of our contact information and ways for you to support the 12 Days of Autumn. With no further ado, I'd like to introduce Mai and Josh.
Hi, everyone. This is Mai, and I'm from the Early Careers program from United Health Group Development Recruiter, and I've been with the organization for 5 years. Started out as an intern, and then got converted over, and so love it here. And super excited to be working with you all and reviewing some of your resumes later. And just a little fun fact about me is I cannot swim. And so if someone on here knows how to swim, feel free to teach me too, because that's something I always call out, because I'm planning to take a swimming lesson, but never got the chance to. And so hopefully that is on my to-do list. So it's just a little bit more about me. Josh, do you want to go next?
Yeah, certainly. Good evening, everyone. My name is Josh Ligon, Associate Director of Early Careers Recruitment and Campus Engagement here at UHG. Mai is on my team and is a phenomenal recruiter, so very lucky to have her joining us this evening. I've been with the organization a little bit over a year and spent a little over 20 years in the talent acquisition space. Over half of that has been focused on early careers, but very excited to be here and joining you all. Mai, since you brought up the idea of fun facts, mine, I guess I will say, in my earlier days, I had the opportunity, I got to work on a video shoot for Prince. So that was kind of cool. And they said, whatever you do when he comes out, just don't look him in the eyes. So sure enough, first thing when he comes out, I look right at him, and fortunately did not catch any flack for that, but it was a great experience nonetheless. So again, great to meet you all, and looking forward to sharing with you this evening.
You know, Josh, I think I've heard a similar story. If somebody gave the same advice to somebody else working with Prince, not to look him in the eyes. So
yeah, he's a eccentric, very particular guy, but a genius nonetheless. So yeah.
Great. Well, let's get started. So I'll let y'all take it away.
Sounds good. Thank you, Isha. So I will kick us off, and then later on, Josh will continue on too. So for today's agenda, I will go over the resume overview and what the formatting should look like, talk about some do's and don'ts when you're writing your resume. Then Josh will take on the interview and LinkedIn tips. We will have some time for Q&As, and then we will break off into the resume review sessions. All right, so talking about the resume overview, I have 3 different items on here. First one is format. There are 2 ways on how you can format your resume. And so the first way is chronological, which is to list your work history in reverse chronological order, starting from your most recent experience and so on. The second item is functional. And so that's really listing your work history based on your skills and experiences. The most popular one that we typically see when reviewing student resumes is the chronological one, and that's totally fine too. But if you're someone who is trying to switch your career, usually I would advise the functional one, just because then you will want to list anything that's related to the job description at the top versus having them at the bottom. So that's the first thing the recruiter can catch when they're reading your resume. So that's the biggest difference between the 2 different formatting. Then going to the second piece here is the page layout, and I call this the page layout margin. So the page layout margin really plays a huge difference on how your resume looks like. So the first one I have on here is the normal page layout, which is 1 inch top and bottom. And then the second one is the narrow page layout, which is 0.5 inch top and bottom. So if you're someone who has a lot of experiences and you have a lot of things that you want to include in your resume, highly recommend the narrow page layout so you can utilize those white space as much as you can. And then if you're someone who maybe just graduated and just entering the workforce, don't have too many details or too many work experience that you want to include on your resume, I usually recommend the normal page layout, 1 inch top and bottom. So it really depends on where you're at with your career, and that plays a huge role in how you want to lay out your resume. The last piece here is the third one, and this one goes hand in hand with the layout too. So length of resume. I usually get this question quite often when I'm at the career fairs or when I'm doing resume review is, how long should my resume be? And so my typical answer to this is 1 page preferred and 2 pages max. If you have more than 2 pages, I typically, advise for you to remove any irrelevant experiences. So if, for example, if in high school you worked as a waitress and in college you are applying for an internship that's in IT, you can definitely remove the waitress, work experience, and then keep anything that's related to technology. So that's just an example. And I have a couple more examples in a little bit here, but just want to call that out. So Isha, if you could just move forward to the next slide, please. All right. So another question that I get quite often is, what should I list first? So I have a couple items listed on here. Some of them are must-have and some of them are optionals. So I will go through each item here and let you know which one are the must-have and then which ones are the optionals one. So for objective, that one is optional. And the reason behind the objective is really for the recruiter to understand where you want to go with your career and what type of roles you're looking for. So the one question you should ask yourself when you're doing your objective is, how do you fit into the company? What skill sets can you bring in, or what positions that you've done in the past that can really help out with that? So I did provide an example statement on here that you can, use as an example for you to help you with your objective. And the example here is to contribute my coding expertise as a programmer to the growth and objectives of the organization. So that is quite, simple and to the T. So when a recruiter sees this, they know exactly that, hey, this is an individual who's interested in technology and probably a software developer role. And so that's really nice to just see that. Again, this is that first one is optional. The second one is education. That one's a must-have. So please make sure that you are listing your school, your major. GPA is optional. But if you do have a really good GPA, I would definitely recommend you putting it in your resume. And the anticipated grad date will help the recruiters know if you're eligible for an intern role or a full-time role. So it's just nice to have all of those things under the education section. So the third item here is the skills. That one I personally say is a must-have. Some recruiters have other, preference where they say that's optional. The reason why I have this as a must-have is because it provides an additional detail or layer of who this candidate is or who you are. So under this section, you will want to put anything that you're proficient in. So let's say you are applying for a software developer role and you have some programming languages or coding languages that you will want to put that under this section. So like Java, Python, SQL, all of those are helpful for the recruiter to know. And then if you are also proficient in like Microsoft softwares, those are important things to know too. So Excel, PowerPoint, Words are all great things. And then the fourth piece is relevant experiences. This one is unique in the sense where I don't really see that often in resumes. And I think a lot of the time is because students think that they shouldn't put that in there, but it's awesome to have it in your resume, especially if you're just entering the workforce or if you're changing your career and you want to have something that stands out. So the relevant experiences are anything that is project related or coursework related to the position. So going back to the example, software developer, if you are applying for an internship and you've never done an internship within that area, you will want to put like your coursework or any application that you developed on your own on your resume. So perfect section for you to put in some of those or highlight some of those projects that you've done. The fifth item here is work experiences. So that one is a must-have. This one is pretty typical where you'll just list out your work experiences related to the position. I usually recommend 3 to 4 bullet points explaining details what you did. If you feel like you don't have enough bullet points and you can only do one, I would recommend you to definitely brainstorm more about what you've done in the past within that position, because usually recruiters want to see more than just one bullet point to really understand what you did when you were working at that place or when you were, let's say a waitress or a software developer. So going to the sixth item here, leadership activities, that one is optional. And what recruiters typically want to see out of this is what other activities are you doing outside of just the work experience and coursework. So when recruiters see that, let's say you're involved with hackathons or computer science program and clubs, they see that you're an individual who is highly interested in technology and you're taking it very serious, and that you are willing to go outside of your comfort zone and do all these different things to gain those knowledge. And usually my ask for the students or, my candidates is to include a 1-sentence description explaining what was your role and what is the purpose of this club. It's just nice to see that 1-sentence description so then the recruiter can understand what you did and how were you involved with this club. And the last piece here is honors and awards. That one is optional as well. It's great to see that you've done, that you got recognized or that you've accomplished a couple of different things. So if you have it, definitely list it down. And also it's nice to include the dates so that we can see if it's something that was more recent that you got or if you've received it, multiple years ago. It's just great to see, all the hard work that you've done and that you've been recognized for that. So those are all the different items that you can have on your resume. Isha, if you can move forward to the next slide, please. So this is an example that I put together, which includes everything that I just went over that you should have in a resume. Again, some of these things are just optionals, and then some of these things are must-haves again. So objective, that's optional. Education's must-have. Skills, must-haves in my preference, and then IT project experience are optional. Employment history is a must-have. Leadership activities optional, and the honors and awards are optional. This resume, I just want to call out that it's not a perfect resume, but it's easy to read, it's simple, it's to the point. And so, for example, if I'm looking at your education, trying to determine, what major you're in, I can automatically see that, that your major is in computer science and that you're hoping to get a position within the technology space. All right, Isha, if you can move forward to the next slide, please. All right, so, all right, thank you for that. This is probably my favorite slide, resume do's and don'ts. I will talk about the do's first, and then I will follow up with the don'ts. Once you're done editing your resume, one of my recommendations is to make sure that you proofread it before you submit it when you're applying to a job position. And it's always nice to have a mentor or a college advisor to review your resume to avoid those grammatical errors and typos. I understand that, and most recruiters understand that it's okay to have a couple grammatical errors or typos here and there, but if you have many grammatical errors and typos, it doesn't look great on your resume. And so just make sure you have that second look at your resume or have another person proofread it with you so that you can avoid those as much as you can. Be consistent with your font size so it's easy for the recruiter to review your resume. When students have different font sizes, it's just harder to read, and it definitely hurts my eyes as a recruiter. And so if you're consistent with font size, a lot of things will stand out automatically. Include contact information. This is key, just so then the recruiter is able to communicate with you and is able to reach out to you if he or she has any question. For this piece, LinkedIn link, that one is optional. If you have that, great. If you don't want to include that in your resume, that's totally fine. I think what the LinkedIn link does for me is when I'm reading through an individual's resume and I want to get more or want to see more from this individual, I check out their LinkedIn to see what other projects they've done. And maybe they have something on their LinkedIn profile that's not in their resume. So that resume, that LinkedIn link is super helpful in that sense. But if you don't want to include it, that's totally fine. And then the last piece here is incorporate keywords from the job description into your resume. So going back to the example I said earlier, if you're applying for the software developer role, you will want to put some of those verbiage from the job description into your resume. So your skill sets, let's say, you have skill sets in coding, Java, HTML, and that's something that you see in the job description. Please make sure that you do put that into your resume. That will make you stand out compared to other candidates. So just I would say that's the one tip I usually always recommend students to look for is ways on how you can incorporate these keywords so then you can be a top candidate. For the don'ts, I would say the first call out here is colored font. I know sometimes students want to be creative and want to include some colors in their resume. I just say at all costs, if you can just keep it simple, black and white, that's nice enough. Once you include too much color, sometimes it just looks too messy for recruiters. So if you keep it, black and white, I think that's just perfectly fine. Don't include unnecessary personal information, photo, marital status, and so on. Photos, sometimes I do see that, but what happens is when you include a photo, it could take up some of those resume space that you need to include some details. So just avoid these at all costs if you can. And then don't include old emails or phone numbers. So going back to your contact information, making sure everything's up to date so the recruiter can easily reach out and provide you with updates. Don't use nickname. I would say this is a big call out here, just because I know that sometimes people like to use nickname. So if you currently use a nickname on your resume, I would highly recommend you to go back and change it to your legal full name. This is the way on how recruiters are able to search for your application. So if, for example, I received your resume from a career fair, I'm using your name that you put on your resume to look up for your application in our system. And if you use a nickname, I might not be able to find that. And especially when if we do end up hiring you and you receive an offer, it's going to be difficult at the end when we onboard you because of legal reasons. So I would say definitely, avoid using nickname too. So just make sure to use your legal name. And once you start, with the employer, or once you start with that company, you could definitely, use your nickname on, WebEx and Microsoft Teams and Zoom and stuff like that. Then the last piece here is landscape format. I've only seen this once, and so I don't think that's pretty typical, but just want to call out that at all costs, make sure that you keep your resume in portrait format. It's just easier to read from top to bottom versus side to side. And so just make sure that before you submit your resume, that it's in the right format version. So avoid landscape. That's everything I have for resume do's and don'ts. Thank you, Isha. If you could go to that. Josh will take on the next couple of slides here, and we'll go over interviewed and LinkedIn tips.
Thank you very much, Mai, and thank you for that overview. I think all very helpful information. Over the years, have done a lot of these types of trainings and explaining to lots of students and other individuals around resumes. I think it's worth noting that you can talk to 10 different recruiters and you're going to get 10 different, recommendations or thoughts on what makes up a good resume. I think this is very comprehensive and all very beneficial. At the end of the day, I think you need to be comfortable with your own resume and be able to speak to it. This is kind of that foot in the door, so to speak, to hopefully get you to that interview. So it's really about being comfortable with the information that you're putting out there. So Mai, thank you very much. Isa, thank you again for allowing us the opportunity to speak with the individuals here this evening. Really appreciate it. I'm going to take an opportunity to talk a little bit about some interview tips, as well as some LinkedIn tips, which has become almost a core piece of the recruiting and hiring and job searching effort these days. So you can go on to the next slide. And I will caveat this by saying we are certainly in unique times. And when we think about the pandemic and with COVID, we're primarily virtual right now. I know Mai and our team, we've gone completely from a recruiting perspective. We're not on campus. We're not going out and meeting face-to-face with individuals. So some of this, I do think it's beneficial, but also know, and I'll try to speak to a little bit of it from a virtual perspective, but never think it hurts to kind of cover what could be beneficial and helpful from an interviewing perspective. And then we'll talk a little bit about LinkedIn as well. So first off, doing your homework, coming in, you want to have some sense of understanding about the organization that you're interviewing with, their mission, their values. You'll be able to tell from the job description what are those core responsibilities, and keeping that in mind as you're preparing to speak to those and kind of anticipating the questions that you're going to be asked. So definitely making sure that you've done that prep up front and feeling like you're prepared going into that interview. Asking yourself, is this really something that I want to do? We see a lot of candidates who, if you look into their profile, they've applied to 15, 20 different positions, and it's across the board. And as a recruiter, when you look at that, we have access to that and can see what you've applied to. And well, do they really know what they want to do? Are they just kind of throwing it out there and just kind of looking for whatever? Is this something that is of interest to you? And are you going to be happy in the role? And I think before you start applying at mass, making sure that number one, you're qualified as best as possible, and making sure this is something that you can see yourself doing. So making sure that you're asking yourself those questions. One of the things that I've always said in an interview that resonates most is when a person is genuine and you can sense that true interest in the role and a passion for wanting to do the work. So I ask that you keep that in mind as you're applying. And is this an organization or a role that you can really see yourself in? And again, doing that homework is going to help you identify that as well. Making sure that you're prepared, right? Again, it talks here about making sure you're dressed appropriately. And even though we're not able to do a lot of interviews in person right now, there are a lot of live two-ways, or even with video interviews that are recorded. You want to make sure that you look the part. And I always say err on the side of being more conservative and dressing more professional. If you know more about the organization and you know that they're very laid back and that's not a big thing for them, that's always good to know. But again, always erring on that side of presenting yourself in a more professional fashion. Again, reviewing your resume, making sure that obviously you know what you've done and know what's on those resumes, but being able and making sure that you're able to speak to those things as well. Around the timing, you know, if you're going to an interview, which maybe isn't happening a lot right now, making sure that you've kind of laid out, okay, how do I get there? Is there going to be traffic? Is there going to be road construction? But also not being too early, because as soon as you arrive, they're going to inform the individual that you are there, you've arrived. And if you're extremely early, it may feel, these hiring managers and interviewers are very busy. Their calendars are full. They may feel pressured that, okay, they're here. I gotta go get to this interview. I think what we've talked about here, that kind of like 10 to 15 minutes beforehand, showing up, you're showing that you're ready, you are on time, but not being too early, not being late if possible. Certainly things come up, but being mindful of that. As you noticed this evening, in a virtual space, a lot of times if you're checking in, it's going to ask you, you have to wait to be admitted. So that's something to be mindful of. Again, if they're seeing, it pops up on their screen that you've joined in 25 minutes prior to your interview, it might put them like, oh boy, I got to rush and I have to get to this. That 5 to 10 minutes maybe before an interview, I think would be appropriate. And then when they're ready, they'll admit you in on those virtual interviews and beginning the discussion. So next slide, please, Isa. All right. Some more things to consider here, you know, as best you can. And this is the great thing about social media and especially with LinkedIn, you can do research on the individuals that you're meeting with. Most times you're going to know in advance who you're interviewing with, and can be able to look them up, get a little bit of background, maybe even address some of those things during your interview. And again, in person, it talks here about, you know, what you're wearing for attire. Conservative people sometimes can be very sensitive to smells or whatnot. So make sure you're taking it easy on any, whether perfume or cologne, things like that. You don't want jewelry and accessories taking away from the attention to actually your experience and what you're speaking about, anything that might take their attention away from that. And it talks about here, you know, bringing a folder or padfolio. So you've maybe taken some notes beforehand. Also, a great way for you to be able to jot down notes during your interview and jot down any questions that you might have as well for the interviewer. That leads into making the most out of your interview, not relying on the application or resume to do that selling for you. Sell yourself. Come with those questions. It's an opportunity. It's not just the employer or the individual interviewing you. You're interviewing us as well and trying to identify, is this role and is this company the right fit for you, and something that's going to keep you engaged and from a professional standpoint, keep you happy. Trying to be mindful of time because we're at 6:30 right here. Interview do's and don'ts, you can read through that. But I think this last point is very important. It's being yourself. If you're not able to bring your full, true, genuine self to work, I think that's a big red flag and something that should make you consider whether or not this is the right role for you. Make sure that you are presenting yourself as you are, what you bring to the table. And if that doesn't resonate with the organization or what they're looking for, then it's probably not the right fit for you. So make sure that, again, you are bringing that to the table. Would strongly encourage that. You can go on to the next slide there, Isa. And then after the interview, and I think a lot of people overlook this, but maybe taking some notes, about how that conversation went. How do you feel you did? What were you getting from the interviewer? What was the vibe, or what were they giving off, right? Did what they talk about align with what's in the job description? Is what they're asking for in that role truly what they were, advertising in the posting? Those are things to keep in mind. And also, and I think this is nowadays, I'm just speaking my own opinion, I think this is lost on a lot of people, but those thank you follow-ups, I think, are extremely important, and those stick in the interviewer's minds. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a letter, although I've received cards, handwritten cards or letters, and those are fantastic to receive. And I still have a file of my own where I've kept all of those. I think those are great. But at a minimum, I would encourage you to send a follow-up email. If you don't have that prior to the interview, ask for it in the interview so that you can do that follow-up. And it doesn't have to be a lengthy email. It's simply reiterating your interest in the opportunity, why you think you're a good fit for that role, and thanking them for their time. It's as simple as that. I know I've always done that, or made an effort to do that. And I've also seen situations where a hiring manager has asked, did you ever get a follow-up email or a thank you for the time or whatever else? And that was sometimes kind of a pretty heavy weighing factor in whether or not we either move them forward or we're going to present an offer. So it may seem like a little thing, but it goes definitely a long way in, who you are and your, just as a candidate, you're who you are. So a little thing, but definitely I would be mindful of that and make sure that you're providing that follow-up and those thank yous to your, and not just, and it could be multiple interviews. So doing that with each interviewer as well in those situations. Next slide, please, Isa. So a little bit about LinkedIn. Again, this is something that is now kind of commonplace, I think, for a lot of people, and a very good and relatively easy way to expand your network, identify opportunities, connect with individuals in the industry or space that you're looking for. First off, if you don't have one, I strongly recommend you create a LinkedIn profile. A professional photo is not mandatory, but it's certainly a nice to have. A lot of times I've seen at whether it be conferences or kind of any employer related events, a lot of times they'll have an area and something that they provide is an opportunity to get kind of a headshot, right? Where it's a little bit more professional that you're able to add on LinkedIn. It is a professional work site or social media site. A lot of times now it can sometimes lean or sway towards feeling a little bit Facebookish, or this doesn't seem to really be professional related. But the intent is for it to be a professional social media site, and that opportunity to share ideas, network, look for opportunities, get your name and your experience out there. Definitely giving a summary of who you are. It doesn't mean it has to be very stale. I think it is an opportunity to give and show a little bit of your personality and let that shine through. It gives you the chance to be a little bit more creative. How are you going to grab somebody's attention? Obviously, you're including more your professional experience on that. Gives you a chance to highlight your education as well as your skill sets. LinkedIn is an online resume at the end of the day. And it does give you the opportunity to upload that so that people can access that as well. But really, this is an opportunity for you to put yourself out there and hopefully start to garner some attention. Making connections, it is a great way to build your professional network. Getting out there, identifying individuals maybe in your industry, maybe where you would like to work, finding those individuals and reaching out and starting to connect with them on LinkedIn. I think with that, when you are offering up an invite, you can just do a standard one and it'll send it and just ask somebody to connect with you. It also gives you the option to make it more personable. And I strongly encourage that, even if it's as simple as, you know what, I think highly of this organization. I see you work there. We're in a similar field. Would love the opportunity to connect. I think that is a great way to connect. It makes it, again, more personable, and a good way to, again, start building out your network. Similarly, if people are looking to connect with you, you could make arguments either way. There's some people who are very particular about who they invite into their network or allow in. Some that are very more open. Mine would probably agree with me, I think, but as recruiters, we're always trying to connect. And so most invites that come my way, unless maybe they're trying to sell me something that doesn't really relate or I'm not interested in, I'm most likely to connect, because you never know where that might, either immediately or down the road be beneficial for that individual or for myself in something that I might be looking for in an applicant or a candidate. You can go to the next slide, please, Isa. Some others, again, just creating your own content. Again, the idea here is that it is a professional networking site. So making sure you're being very mindful of what you're putting out there, and making sure it's being professional and professionally related. You do have the opportunity to endorse others for certain skill sets that they have. Doing that will give them notifications, and then people may be more likely to do that endorsement of you as well and the things that you've done. So another way to kind of put yourself out there. Again, you have access to a lot of individuals out there, connecting with leaders. I think another good thing is connecting maybe with either recruiters or people in the talent acquisition space at the organizations you're interested in. We hear all the time of people going into that proverbial black hole when they apply, right? And you know what? I've never gotten a call. They're not even looking at my resume. What's going on here? If you have that and somebody that's in that space or that is recruiting or has that connection to that is a great individual to be able to be connected with and be able to follow up with and send a message. Hey, I've applied to this role. Very interested. Would you be willing to connect and have a quick 15-minute conversation? Or can you please make sure that my resume gets into the right hands? Those kinds of things. Anytime I've connected or had informational interviews with an individual, I tell them, let me know. I'm like, you've already got the first step down. You have somebody now on the inside that's connected. I can very easily look up a job posting, who is the recruiter, what they're looking for, and then make that connection, right? So I definitely encourage you, if you're able to make those connections within organizations, I think that's very beneficial. And then following others, there's groups out there, there's companies you can follow that can give you updates, so you'll get information on things that might be going on within the organization, potentially job postings or what they're looking for. That can help guide you and maybe make you aware of certain opportunities that are out there. So if you're not on LinkedIn, I highly encourage it. A lot of valuable information out there and things at your disposal that can help you in that job search and helping connect with individuals within the industry that you're interested in. So I think that might be the last slide for this, Isa. Yeah, so not sure if there's any questions at this point. Quite a bit covered here in the last 40 minutes between the resume tips and interviewing in LinkedIn. But I would be open to any questions, Isa. If you want us to get moving, that's fine. But
well, I was going to say,
questions,
we actually have a couple of extra minutes if you want to go back and talk about some of the do's and don'ts on the interview tips. and then we can do some questions.
Sure. If you don't mind
Okay.
going back to that slide, I don't have it memorized, but
No problem. I think some of the points in there I thought were very interesting and important, so make sure you want to
Yeah,
share that information as well.
and this goes back to my point, right? This is tough because, again, not a lot of in-person on-site interviews happening right now. But it talks here about smiling and shaking hands firmly. Every time I see this, it reminds me of a story my grandfather would always tell me, or not a story, but just advice, was that you can tell everything you need to know about a person by the way they shake your hand. And I've always lived by that. It's a nice, strong, firm handshake. You don't want to crush their hand, and come across too strong, but you also don't want to have a wet noodle of a hand and like you're not even there, right? So I think that's very important, being mindful of that impression that you're making right off the top. Again, keeping that enthusiasm and just a genuine interest in the role throughout the interview. It talks about, listening carefully. There's nothing worse when you come to the end of an interview and as the interviewer, so what questions do you have? You know what? I'm feeling pretty good about things. Thanks for all the information. I'm good. For me, again, it's personal, but I want somebody to have questions. And what are you looking for? What are you looking to find out? And that's where having that Padfolio or the notebook where you can be taking notes throughout the interview and then have some of those follow-up questions afterward. I think that's extremely beneficial. Your posturing and that, whether a live two-way, virtually or in person, is huge. One of the tips that I had heard, which I really like, is mirroring the posturing of the person you're interviewing with. Subconsciously, they're going to pick that up, and that's kind of actually a positive thing, kind of a psychology thing there, which is an interest of mine. Making sure that you are aware and have an understanding of the roles and responsibilities. And there could be some questions that you might have around that. In this virtual space, you may find it might not be a live two-way, but it could be a phone interview. And I think with that, there are still little things you can do. For me, because I've been in these situations, I always make sure to try to be smiling while I'm doing my interview. I think that comes through whether you think so or not on the phone. And I've also even then done those interviews in front of a mirror so I can see what my reactions are and see kind of what my nonverbals are. Because again, I think that does come through. So a couple things to keep in mind. The don'ts, I think this is a very good call out, not making any negative remarks or commentary about your current job or past job. If you're someone that's always, finding excuses or talking maybe negatively or poorly about a prior manager or job or company, they're going to see that trend there. And I think it's going to come through not so much as there was an issue with these organizations or with these managers, but maybe it's about the person, right? And maybe not be the easiest to work with. So even if there's legitimate reasons for maybe why that didn't work out, I would refrain from making those negative remarks. In those initial interviews, stay away from the conversations around salary, holidays, benefits. You will get that information later on if things go well and as things proceed. They will start to talk more about that information. I think it calls out here, if you've done your research about the role and kind of what the average comp is for those positions, have that in mind. And you certainly need to stand up for yourself when it comes to those conversations. But it needs to be, if you're going to ask for more or expect more, there needs to be some rationale behind that. You need to be able to speak to why you believe you deserve that, whether it's through that experience, through the research and the data that you found from a compensation standpoint. Those are things to keep in mind in those types of conversations. I can't quite see the bottom of that, Isa, but I think that kind of sums it up.
Yes.
Yeah.
If the interviewer asks what salary you want, give a range based on your research of the job market, but indicate you're more interested in the opportunity for continued learning and professional development. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, don't get me wrong. We all want to be compensated fairly and earn what we think we deserve. I would, and just going to go on a limb, I would say most individuals here, it maybe not all about the money, right? It's more about the opportunity and hoping and trusting that you will be compensated fairly. Again, there's a time and place for that conversation. And as long as you have the data and rationale behind it to be able to, explain why you're asking or needing what you or asking for what you want, completely fine. And one of my mottos is if you don't ask, you don't get, but be able and willing and ready to explain why and why you would maybe deserve or warrant that salary. So, yeah.
Most definitely. And do we have any questions? This is a good time. If you're on live, you can put them in the Facebook comments. If you're part of the Zoom meeting today, you can put them in the chat or unmute yourself and ask them now. We have a lot of great comments throughout the conversations. I agree, Clifford. Definitely research similar positions so you actually know what is fair. Volunteering with Autumn will definitely give you some leadership skills and things to speak on in an interview. Thanks for that. Any other comments or questions before we break out into our breakout rooms? We will have a split between the audience on Facebook and the audience on Zoom. So I want to make sure we take this time to get our questions out before we split into those groups. Okay, well, at this time, Michael is going to assign everyone in the Zoom meeting to the respectful breakout rooms. Josh is going to lead the excuse me, this is going too fast. Josh is going to lead the breakout room regarding people who are already in their career and want to transition over to tech. And Maya is going to lead to the group that is freshly in their career and they're getting started and making sure they're having the right resumes set up. Everyone else in Facebook Live, thank you for joining. I am not moving around right correctly over here, excuse me. Want to share a couple of things before we finish our live. In terms of participating with Autumn, thanks for joining the 12 Days of Christmas. This is the second day. We have a full 2 weeks of events lined up. All of our events are related to supporting the petition we have for Texas Technology for All. So if you could visit Austin, AUTMTX, that's autumntex.org. Visit our website, take a look at our page if you're interested in getting career development skills, workforce development skills in specific areas of tech, or maybe you want to join the organization to have a better network or provide your talents and services in volunteering. All those opportunities are available and explained on our website. If you would like to support the Texas Technology for All petition, please go and sign the petition. We are making some demands we want to send over to our governor and focusing on providing devices, focusing on providing more technically related curriculum for those who need it, education who need it, and also providing job opportunities for the Black and Latinx community and all other underserved communities. So this is ways you can get involved, can spread the word. You can donate to Autumn by going to our special link for PayPal. We'll put that in the Facebook comments, as well as I mentioned, sign the petition. If you have any questions regarding the petition or you would like more information, there is a FAQ page we have here depicted on the left, but it's also on the petition and our website. Finally, thank you for joining us today. If you are still on and you see this coupon code, That means you get a free, well, not free, a $99 class credit for free for any short form workshops offered by General Assembly. Just use Autumn 99 at checkout and use it before January 1st of 2021. Make sure you use that code. As long as you sign up for any of the courses or the workshops before the 1st of January, you can still have access to that workshop. And last but not least, our next event will be tomorrow. We will have a joint event with Hispanic Hackers. The event is called Entering and Excelling in Tech, a conversation about the Black and Hispanic experience in the technology industry. We'll have Carlos, Morgan, and Sara presenting on that conversation, and breakout sessions revolving around the technology showcase, a resume workshop by Let's Eat Grandma, and mock interviews hosted by Hispanic Hackers. So join us tomorrow. Make sure you register. The link is at the bottom as well as on our events page, autmtx.org/events to register. Thanks for joining. See you tomorrow.